Hi, this is Teresa at Divine Frequency, and today we have my good friend James Gilliland here. Thank you so much for being here today, James.
Oh, it's an honor to be on your show.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And I'm just going to do a quick intro for those of you who don't know James Gilliland. He really doesn't need an intro. I'm sure you guys all know him, but he is a spiritual advisor. He's an author. He's a minister. He's a counselor. He's an expert in star families, which is totally epic and amazing and interesting. He is the founder and the owner of ECETI Ranch in Washington State. For those of you who don't know, it's a place where you can go. He holds conferences and workshops. You can watch the sky. It's right underneath a mountain. It's gorgeous out there. Lots of wonderful energies, and people come together from all over the world to talk about all things ET. ECETI stands for Enlightened Contact with Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So if you want to check out his website, it's eceti.org. And yeah, let's jump right in, James. Thank you for being here again. So first question I have for you, we're just going to dive right in because, I mean, just really quick to my viewers, I feel like James Gilliland, I just want to put him on the tallest mountain in the world and give him the loudest microphone and allow him to project all of his knowledge out into the world. That would just be wonderful and healing for everyone. That's how I feel about James. So we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about the good, the bad, the evil, the positive, and all of it. So you've recently stated that as a human race, we no longer have the luxury of remaining in ignorance and acting outside of universal law. That was one of the phrases you used recently. And I wanted to kick off this interview with asking you if you could describe what universal law is to you.
Yeah, definitely. It's very simple, and it's written in the heart of hearts of everyone. Uh, everybody in their heart of hearts wants to just live a loving, joyous life, abundant life, in peace and harmony. And most want a connection with their creator. Those are basics that are instilled within everybody. And also universal law best would be described as universal peace, brother, sisterly love, individual freedom and prosperity for everyone. And we have to put, Earth in there too. We have to start, being kind to the planet and taking care of the planet because, we're destroying the platform for life, which we all need to hang out here. It's what gave us this body. We wouldn't be talking right now without these bodies that came from the Earth. So we need to really respect, love your mother, basically.
I love that. Great answer. So can you explain the concept of no longer having the luxury to remain in ignorance a little more in depth?
Well, what's happening is there's a shift, an ascension. Everybody has different names for it, and it can be scientifically explained. The Schumann resonance is off the scale. It used to be at 7. It's gone up to like 500. It's gone over 1,000, and then back down to 500. So the whole Earth is vibrating much quicker at a faster level. The gamma rays are off the scale that are hitting the Earth. The solar storms, the solar activity is off the scale too. We're supposed to be in the solar minimum. We're not. And we're moving through a highly energized place in space right now that some people call it, everybody has a different name for this field. Some people used to call it the photon belt, things like that. But that's also finally been recognized, by NASA. They tell us after everybody knows, it's amazing. But so that's going down. And it's all there. Cosmic rays, they finally released a chart on cosmic rays. Cosmic rays create huge shifts, even in DNA. We're getting bombarded with cosmic rays off the scale as well. So scientifically, this is all happening. So we're going through a natural ascension process. It's an evolutionary part of it's our destiny as we go through this evolutionary process to go to the next level, to reach the next frequency. So now a good, more down-to-earth level is whenever the solar storms hit, when we get hit by these coronal mass ejections or solar flares, you can watch the bioelectric fields around the body get energized. People go into emotional trauma outbursts. Some people go into comatose. Stanford's proven this, that monkeys, when they experience these fluctuations of energy, go from self-mutilation to comatose activity. And the key of it is when we know what's going on, we don't have to behave like monkeys. We can override this. We have the ability to override these energies and flow with them. But All these things are happening. They're real. They've been defined. Scientists know about it. They don't know how they all connect together, most of them. But we've been talking about this since 1982, so we've known about this. We knew where the Earth was going, and getting back to this energy, what is within this energy? Light, and light is conscious. Energy is conscious. They all come together. And so we're going through this huge consciousness shift that we have to become frequency specific to this shift and rise with the energy. And so the luxury part of it is we no longer have the luxury of continuing in ignorance and continue to do things against universal law. We can't keep doing things that are unkind to each other and humanity and the earth. It's all of that is going to be revealed. It's all being pushed up, and which is fulfilling all the ancient prophecies. So it's all coming up. You can't, and you can see, I mean, it's hilarious, the political agenda. I'm sure you've been watching that. I go, God, people had no idea how dirty it was, and now they're seeing how dirty it is, and how and just trillions. And every time I turn around, I see $55 billion here, $55 billion there. Nobody knows where it goes, And once somebody said something like $550 trillion now is unaccountable. It's the amount of the numbers are just astronomical, and so we're finally realizing that we have been governed by a global elite. This money gets siphoned off to these guys, and it's really affecting the people here, the infrastructure, the planet, everything is all being affected by that. And so what's going to happen is there's going to be a big implosion. All of this is going to come back in on itself, and we're in the process where this is all going to be made known, and then all of those funds will be diverted back to humanitarian purposes and healing the planet, and back to the people.
So you just gave a whole lot of information to unpack, but I did want to kind of take a step back for a second. And you described the effects on the earth of what we're going through and how we need to now kind of catch up as a consciousness, a collective consciousness. Can you describe that connection between what we're dealing with as far as the Schumann resonance spiking, and now you're saying that we don't have the luxury of kind of being ignorant anymore? We have to rise to the occasion. Like, why is that? And how do you know that we have to change the way we are? And can you unpack that a little bit?
Well, basically, the bottom line is we have to become frequency specific to what's happening, this shift that's happening that I talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that we have to start living our lives according to universal law, which again is, universal. We have to work towards universal peace, brother, sisterly love, and individual freedom and prosperity for everybody. That is the basics. There's an old Cherokee saying, if you want to simplify it, if it isn't good for everyone, it isn't good, and that keeps it really basic. And so the trick is we all have to find the impeccable integrity within ourselves to live this way. And it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have to look at our lives with brutal honesty and ask ourselves, are we creating heaven on earth? Are we operating under universal law? Is this our goal? Are we doing things that are harmful to humanity and the earth? It's really gets down to basics. And so again, we have to use brutal honesty in our lives and ask ourselves, what are we doing? What's our intention? Is it just money and power and fame and wealth? Are we here in service to others and service to the planet?
So what you're basically saying is, because our earth is becoming higher vibration, we also as a human race, because we are a part of earth, we are entities as well. We're conscious life, and we have to rise to the occasion. We have to rise our vibration as well. And the loving vibration is a higher vibratory state. Therefore, we have to approach closer to love, closer to source. And that's, okay.
Well, to really simplify it, basically all attitudes, all emotions have a frequency to them. The lowest frequency emotions are fear, guilt, unworthiness, greed, all of that stuff. Those are very low frequencies. And we all have a little bit of that to one degree or another in our fields of energy. So the more we release these lower frequencies, these base emotions, especially fear, the more we release this, the more our frequencies rise up. And then we start aligning with where the earth is going, and she's going to ascend, she's ascending. So it's not optional anymore. That's what I'm saying. We don't have the luxury of remaining ignorant and continuing to do things that are harmful to humanity, the earth, and others, and refusing to heal and projecting all of our stuff on everybody else. I mean, Clinton's book is a classic example. What happened, what happened, the world hates you. It's because you've lied to them redundantly, and you've deceived them, and it's taken billions of dollars. But anyway, out of the coffers, it could be going to the people, but that's just a microcosm of the macrocosm. It's much bigger. But we're seeing this, that you're going to see the whole political arena be exposed for what it is. You're going to see the whole business arena be exposed for what it is. You're going to see the religious institutions being exposed for what they are, and it goes on and on and on. And as far as the religious institutions, what I would like to say is, first of all, if the religions were created to serve humanity, to help those less fortunate, to help end poverty, to help end sickness and disease. And that was their original intent. And what's really cool right now is Mary is coming back, with a bat, basically. She's done. She's done with all the pedophile stuff. She's done with all the deception and everything. So that's all going to be exposed. And these are the higher dimensional things that I'm talking about. But the divine feminine is coming in, and it's coming in with a bat. And the Pleiadians, who actually created the colonies of Atlantis and Lemuria, which weren't fables. I mean, they've been pretty much proven that did exist. They were the root race that started that, and they're returning back. And they actually, their planet Era also has a goddess energy connected to it. And she actually came and merged with Gaia, and they merged, whatever name you want to give her. Everybody has different names, Pachamama, everybody's different. She actually merged her consciousness with that. And so it's like the wake up. The way I can explain this, and now this is going to get on the wild side a little bit. So the earth itself is ascending. She's opening, expanding, ascending. And you've got all these higher dimensional energies pressing in. The source itself, whatever name you want to give it, God, Creator, Great Spirit, is pressing its energy in as well. And so it's like the earth is expanding. The other energies are coming in. With them come universal law. That means that everything that is out of alignment with that, if it doesn't transform, it's going to implode. It's not optional.
And how do you know this information? Do you see visions of this? Do you have a group of people? Do you have sources? Like, where does this information come to you?
It comes from multiple sources. A lot of the information comes from science, and also from my own near-death experiences where I, came back and left the door open. And so I have constant communication with these higher dimensions. It comes from multiple people in very high places, that are giving me information. I have a direct line to some of the most powerful people on the planet that are actually realize that this change is coming, and they're on the right side of the fence, and they're working towards, releasing these humanitarian funds and all these other things. They're working at that. So what they've got against them is this deep state and these other things, and it's just like whack-a-mole. It's like everything starts to go forward, and the mole comes up and stops it. And so that mole gets taken out, and then it starts going forward, and another mole pops up, and then they whack that mole. And it just keeps going on and on and on. Most of the moles got whacked, and most of them are running right now for their freedom and their lives because they've been exposed for who they are and what they've done. So it is going to come forward very quickly, and much quicker than people think. So it's not, that's what I'm saying. It's not optional. A good way to explain it is that there's an old saying, he who owns the gold makes the rules. That's the golden rule, basically. Well, the top of the level people that own the gold, that control the gold, have had a major awakening. They've actually had Kuan Yin appear to them. They've had signs come to them, and it's told them now it's time to move this money towards humanitarian means, humanitarian projects and things like that. And so they're doing all they can to move this, to help with this shift, to move things, in alignment with universal law, to move this thing forward. And but you've got this other group that just wants to maintain, the unbridled greed and wealth and all the other things that have been going on for so long.
So it's in an effort to keep this sort of compartmentalized, which is important, and then you have to take it all in together. So there's like a big picture, and then there's like the evidence. So
Yeah.
the way I want to attempt to break this down, because this is a huge topic, is to have you have the evidence that's occurring and showing it's rearing its head on the planet, so that you're able to see, okay, this is what's happening on the planet as far as like the political arena and everything. And then you have the layer up from that, where you have these ET races and the energy's changing and things that, like, you have to dig a little bit deeper to find that information to see the top down. So I thought that we could go down that path a little bit and talk a little bit about, I wanted to talk about where do I want to go? Because I have a whole long list of questions that we can go to, but I want to keep this organized. So can we first talk about the story of, let's talk about the higher council. I wanted to ask you about that, because you said that the higher council's coming in. There's a lot happening right now with regard to these people. Can you tell us who the higher council is and what their purpose is right now?
Yeah, there's many councils, not just one. And so there are councils with some of the masters that we know that have been on the earth and work with the earth. There's those councils. There's the Orion Council of Light, and that group has had their wars with the reptilians and the grays and more the malevolent ETs. They've had their wars. They're victorious. They've cleaned up their sections, and they're a major player here. So you've got the Pleiadian councils too, and most of the people on the Orion Council of Light are 6-dimensional, and then you've got the Pleiadians, which go from the 5th to the 7th. Probably some 9th as well. But they're also working towards this because, they have more genetic stock in the earth than any other race. And so they're working very hard, to turn this back around. And then you've got, the Andromedan Council, which most of the other councils go to, which are mythologically known as archangels. They have huge bodies. They're 8 to 10 feet tall. They have magnetized light bodies, and they have huge energy fields behind them. Now, when they appear, they just appear wherever they want to appear. They don't have to flap wings and fly. The wings are their energy body that feathers back when they come into this system, and people mistakenly think they're wings. It's like Isis and all these wing gods. They didn't have wings. They could fly. They could bilocate, which a lot of lamas and yogis can do today. I've done that myself several times, but it's just, but through history, to depict that they have this ability to bilocate, they put wings on them. But it goes on and on. But you've got the Andromedan Council of Light, and then above that you have actually the benevolent Anunnaki that never fell. They didn't fail, and they're going from the 6th to the 9th dimension, and they're returning because they have stock in this too. They actually have some karma because the fallen Anunnaki in the past with Marduk made a pact with the reptilians and brought them in, and that's what we're dealing with to this day. And we've been under a draconian grid. So when you understand everything begins in consciousness, it goes from consciousness to light to energy to mass. Well, everything is controlled through consciousness. So if there's a draconian grid, that's why you have all the brutality and what's happening on the planet right now, is because we've been under this draconian grid. And I tell people, there's so much inhumanity on the earth going on is because there's so much non-human interference that people are not addressing. They're not even aware of it. And the higher dimensional beings are addressing this and taking this out. They're taking out the puppet masters.
So I feel like we need to probably take a step back now, because we talked about the councils, and you're talking about the different ET races, and then you were talking very specifically about some things that occurred on the planet that kind of got us to where we are now. So I want to take a little bit of a step back, and I want to ask you about the beginning of Earth and what that looks like, and if we can kind of bring in the book of Genesis from the Bible and Adam and Eve, and if you can, let's go there. Let's see what we can do there. Party.
You're pushing me in the blasphemy section, But you'll never really understand these sacred books unless you know the real history of Earth. If you know the real history of Earth, that makes sense. So, like, let's take the Bible for instance. The Old Testament has this jealous, wrathful God nobody can appease. You get out of line, you're toast. He was basically a genocidal maniac. He destroyed village after village. He bashed babies' heads out on rocks. He was not a very nice guy. You did not cross him. You did not even say his name, least ye be stoned, So basically, that's the Old Testament. When Jesus came, he said, I bring to you a new covenant, a new image of God, which is the all-loving, all-forgiving God. And what he's talking about is God doesn't have an ego. It can't judge. It's beyond all that. And all of your images of the bearded gods came from the Anunnaki. And some of the Anunnaki were benevolent, some were not. Some were tyrants, And so if you go back to the story of Enki and Enlil, Enki was the scientist. He was the creator god. He was the geneticist, you might say. And these are higher dimensional beings that are here doing all this work. And what's funny is that the woman that was in charge of those creations, where they took this Denisovian man and they jumped up his genetics and created this hybrid so they could get the gold they needed because their planet was dying. One of their outposts was dying because of the sun and coming too close to the sun, and it destroyed everything on the planet. So they had to create a shielding effect. But that, despite a lot of victims will be pissed off, that wasn't really a slave race. It was more of a win-win situation. They jumped them up genetically and gave them access to a lot more higher consciousness and energy. And in turn, they got what they needed to save their planet. And so I'm not saying I totally agree with that, but they're in a pickle. They had to do what they needed to do. What happened is after that, Enki kept up in the ante, and he kept adding more and more DNA, and they became created in the same image and likeness of the gods, not God, the gods. And that's where, we have the DNA of the gods within us right now. A lot of it's not activated. It's just sitting there, but we can activate it. And that's what this shift is doing. This energy coming in is activating our DNA. There's other groups that are doing all they can to stop this activation. And with the chemtrails and everything else they're doing, they're trying to keep us sick, dumbed down, stupid, and block the sun. And that's part of it. There's more to that story. But as I said before, we don't have to worry about ETs coming to invade the earth. The negative ones are already here. They've always been here. The ones that are coming are going to liberate the earth. And we need to realize there's a lot of people out there that are planned opposition. They're in positions to control the narrative. And they're saying there are no negative ETs, and you should open wide and let anything come into your body, and you can communicate with anything that comes along. And that's incredibly irresponsible to make those statements. Because there's an old saying, just because you're dead doesn't mean you're enlightened, and just because you're an ET doesn't mean you're benevolent. Yeah.
Definitely. So let's see, where else do we want to go? You said a lot there. Let's see. So we talked about the higher council, and then you talked about the draconian grid. I wanted to talk a little bit now about, so we've laid out a little bit of what's going on there with the ET races, and I'm interested though in this concept of free will and how this relates to these benevolent races or even malevolent. How does that play in? Because I know that some people say that this would be way against free will for any kind of ET race to come in and do anything. It sounds like what you're describing is they're more ushering this change for the earth herself. How does this play in, and how do we relate? How does the human race relate to these councils?
Okay, the best way to explain it is well, like the Pleiadians, when they found the Andromedans, and they go, these guys have magnetized light bodies, they have massive light ships, they live in a holographic light universe. There's so much love and joy and bliss there. They went to him and they said, will you lead us? Will you lead us? Because we have this problem. We evolved to a certain level, and then we split apart in factions and destroy each other, like Atlantis and Lemuria. Technology, darker spirits come in and start influencing things, and it becomes a mess. And so they've been doing that over and over again. So they went to the Andromeda and said, will you lead us? Will you, govern us? The Andromeda said no. And they're kind of shocked by that. And they said, you need to lead yourselves. You need to be in charge of your own destiny, your own evolution. We will advise you, though. We will be advisors, and we will advise you. And so ultimately, they're not here to lead us. They're not here, but we've already been so trespassed on by these other darker forces. To give us a chance, they need to clean up these darker forces so we can, be free to make our own decisions, to lead ourselves. And that's the process we're undergoing right now. Now, there's a fifth dimensional grid that's coming in to take the place of this draconian grid, which has already been torn apart. It's fallen apart. That's why all these institutions are falling apart right now.
Can you explain what the draconian grid is first?
Yeah. Okay, the draconian grid it's based on competition, greed, fight or flight consciousness. It doesn't have, the humanitarian part isn't in there. It's more of a reptilian type of energy. The humanitarian part is more about cooperation, working together, doing what's highest and best for the whole. It's a different consciousness. And we have both a reptilian and a human brain, so we can shift back and forth between the two brains when necessary. But we need to work more on the frontal lobe of our brains and work on more of what's highest and best good for humanity and the earth. That's where those decisions come from. So basically, that grid is why you have all this gross uneven dispersal of wealth, the class separation. You have, this hierarchical program going on that needs to be done. This old patriotic program, patriarchal program going on. All of this stuff that's aligned with that fifth dimensional grid. It's like we've been enslaved through dependency, all these things that have been going on. That when that comes down, that's going to, which it has come down, and now the fifth dimensional grid is coming in.
Can we, before we talk about that, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to make sure that because I want to make sure that we understand what the draconian grid is. So who created it, when was it created, and what that looks like?
Well, what happened is Marduk, one of the Anunnaki, decided he wanted total supremacy over the earth. And he even warred on his own people to get it. And even Alexander the Great went to his gravesite, basically, and he wanted to honor the general, the greatest general, the greatest warrior on earth, But, actually what he did was he made a pact or an alliance with these reptilian, these other malevolent entities for total supremacy over the earth. And because, evil has to be invited in a way, it's like they do have rules they have to operate by. So he made an agreement, and then he went against his own people and enslaved everybody in collusion with these other beings. And, in the old days, the old statues of Mary and Jesus and things like that, you'd show them with their foot on a reptile. They'd always have their foot smashing a snake, or they have old statues of Michael, with his spear, on a reptile or holding a reptile down. There's a lot of reality to that. There's a reason for that. And people forget that, just like all the old frescoes with UFOs in them, with golden beams coming down to Mary while she's praying, and Jesus when he's being baptized and things like that. Those things are just shoved aside. We've always had a long history of interaction with off-world beings. Some of it was positive, some of it wasn't.
So the draconian grid is essentially an energetic oppression that has been built up over time, and now that's breaking down.
Yeah, you might want to see it as a grid, or I'm trying to think of the word. Like it's almost like a bubble of consciousness and energy around the earth.
Okay.
And it contains it and it controls it, and so and they own it. They run that grid. And a good example of how that grid works is if you look at Hollywood, look at the music and the TV industry. What are their films based on? Survival, sex, and power. And those are your first three chakras. That locks you in those first lower chakras. They own that. They own survival, sex, and power. They know how to control and manipulate you. It doesn't matter. and even fear, survival, fear of survival, and the monetary system. All that stuff is a huge way of controlling the people, and so they use that for their own personal gain. But you can go on and on with this and look at the first three chakras. Now, when you start operating from the heart, they can't control that. Matter of fact, that's a threat. That's a huge threat to them. And what's happening now is people are being activated all across the earth in every kind of position of power you can think of. Their hearts are being activated. They're being initiated, and they're looking around going, I can't be in this anymore. I can't do this. And they're spilling the beans on what's going on. And that's what we're seeing right now is these massive activations are going on. The draconian grid is down. The new grid is taking its place, and people are going to start aligning with that grid and acting appropriately.
You have a very empowering message. So I want to shift there now and let you kind of take the reins and go where you want. Cause I know that you have a lot of contact with lots of different people, and you see a lot of patterns. You've been doing this for a long time, and there's a lot of evidence coming out right now to suggest that changes are definitely happening. We can all agree there. So I just kind of want to let you go and talk about some of this evidence that we're seeing currently that things are changing and what that means, the implications of that.
Yeah, the shift is definitely hitting the fan right now. So there's no way of getting away from it. But I'll tell you what it all boils down to. It's very, very simple. It's as I said before, are you creating heaven on earth, and are you operating within universal law? Those are the keys, the key things. And that is in the heart of everyone. Now, it's been clouded over by all this propaganda, programming, psyops operations, everything. They're all doing that to control your mind, to keep you, the false flags, all that stuff is to keep you in survival, sex, and power, and to keep you under the notion that you need a savior. And guess who the savior is? The very guys that created the false flag. So anyway, that's the way it works. And all this whole thing is designed to keep us suppressed, keep us down, keep us out of the heart and out of the higher levels of consciousness, which I probably need to explain that too. We have 7 chakras that are known that everybody knows about. There's some people say there's more. I don't want to go into that. It doesn't matter, because if your 7th chakra is open, or you're in God consciousness. So the other ones are a mute process. It doesn't matter after that. But your first chakra is survival. It's your base survival. It's your root, your grounded part of you. Your 2nd chakra is your sexual energies, which actually are creational energies, and there's all kinds of weird crap around that I'll go into later. And then you have power, your power chakra. Your power chakra is used to help you fulfill your own unique purpose here. And it's never used to overpower others. It's used to empower others, empower you. It gets misused when you use to overpower others. When you tie that into the sexual energies, you're going to be using sexual energies to manipulate and overpower others and things like that. And that's what we're seeing is coming up to the surface now, because the old grid is down. And so all that stuff is coming up to be healed and looked at. So that's this big shift going on, is that survival, sex, and power are all being let's say the inconsistencies or the imbalances are all coming up. Now love basically is people really need to be centered in the heart. That's where we should operate, not from the brain. The heart is where your soul sits. Your soul is connected to the source. And that's when you have access to all these other dimensions, past lives, everything is when you operate from the heart, and it's an emotional thing. Your emotional body is massive. Your intellect is just a drop in the sea of consciousness. So on the planet, the intellect has been governing things, the male side, the intellect. And as I said before, it's such a small part of our consciousness that we're operating on, we're operating in first gear in a 10-gear car, you might say. And so women by nature are more emotional. They're more connected to the emotional body, which is massive. It's much more bigger than the mental body. It has more access. And, that's why I say I want to counsel grandmothers to run the planet, not, get rid of this old system, because, grandmothers, they've been tempered through wisdom, and they've experienced, they don't send their kids off to war. You know, they understand the necessity of a family. They understand the necessity of good food to feed your family, keeping your family healthy. They have all that within them, and they don't get hijacked by all this mental nonsense and mind control and all this other crap, because they have the basics down. And so that's where we've gone off track. And through all this intellectual rhetoric, you know, like these toxins are good for you, you know, and these herbicides and pesticides are necessary, and they don't even look at what they're doing to the people on the planet. You know, they all they look at is profit, a profit margin, you know, and so that's the sad part. And that's collapsing right now, and the divine feminine is coming in. People are awakening, they're tapping into their emotional bodies, they're connecting to their soul. And that's what these initiations are about. That's happening, where people, they're all of a sudden, they're just awakening, and they go, I can't do this anymore. I can't serve the beast anymore. And that's this big shift. We're right in the middle of that right now.
Can you tell us, thank you for that. That's a great response. Can you tell us a little bit about the collapse and what that is going to look like, what that looks like now, and then what comes next?
Well, there's an old saying, it's either going to break down or break through, you know, and it doesn't have to break down. It can transform. And that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping for a transformation, you know. And, you know, I talk to a lot about, well, I talk about these like Antifa, Black Lives Matters, and these other groups, Open Borders. All these things are all sponsored by the global elite. And if you do your homework, you can see that Soros is checks behind everything. You know, this guy thrives on collapsing countries. And then he comes in and buys everything on 10 cents in the dollar and makes bazillion dollars. You know, that's how he thrives. And a lot of these people that are, you know, they're swinging their fists and this and that, don't realize they're being paid and organized by the very people they're against. So they're using their unhealed wounds and traumas to create division and separation, to collapse the system so they can come in and cash in. And if you really want to get even with these people and all these people you're pissed at, which really goes to the top of the elite and things, you know, unify in peace. Try that out, see what happens. If everybody got together and got on the same page and said, yeah, there has been problems in the past, there has been these things, and if they learn the real history of who was behind those problems, and they unified, it doesn't matter if you're pink, blue, green, or brown or black, you know, we're all going to come together and work under universal law and do things that are highest and best good for the whole, you know, and that's where we need to go. But the main thing is people need to realize that they are being extremely manipulated, you know, by the fake news, by the lamestream news, I call it. You know, they're being manipulated in every way possible. And the trauma that they're manipulating them with, the very same guys that are acting like they're saviors are the ones that caused it.
Can you talk a little bit on the topic of false flags? Because we have a lot of that going on right now. I'm really interested in what your thoughts are on that concept.
Yeah. You know, basically, if you look at the goals of these Illuminati people and things like that, you know, socialism never worked. If you really want to, and communism hasn't worked either. You know, you just look at what's happened in the past. You know, and everybody's going, we have to save lives, we have to stop guns, we have to do this, we have to do that. Well, the first thing they did was take everybody's guns, and then nobody could defend themselves. And then they came in and killed millions and millions and millions of people. We got to look at that history. And so I was raised in a hunting family. You know, it's like, and I evolved out of it. I don't hunt anymore. I don't do that. But guns weren't created for hunting. They're, you know, the Second Amendment was set up for protection, basically, against these very same people. And so the ones that are trying to take your guns away are the very same people that are working for, you know, this New World Order program and things like that. And, you know, as a minister, people go, how could you make such a statement? You know, it's like, being a Christ doesn't mean being a doormat, you know. People don't realize Jesus was a swordsman. You know, he was well trained. You know, he went through all the Egyptian mystery schools. You know, he was extremely trained in self-defense and other things as well. So when you look at the real history, one day, there's a guy named Michal Ledwith who used to be an advisor to the Pope, and he's a good friend of mine, and he had access to all the catacombs and the real history. And people ought to look into his work, at Hamburger University. Go look into his work. And he wrote a book called Deep Deceptions and how Jesus became the Christ and things like that. If you really want to know the real history, the true history, read that and it'll make sense. But a lot of these sacred books, the ancient biblical books and things like that, they don't make sense unless you know the real history of Earth. But once you know the real history of Earth, you go, aha, because you really think about it. Okay, if you have the image of this jealous, wrathful God, that if you step out of line one iota, you're going to become toast, right? And how can you connect to God? Paul says when you're walking in love, you're walking with God. They have all these statements. They talk about love as the ultimate power. It supersedes all laws and all prophets. They talk about the law of love. Well, how can you connect to God if you fear God, if you think you're guilty and unworthy and all these things that they heap on you? You can never make that connection. You have to bust past that. So when Jesus came, he did bring a whole new image, of this all-loving, all-forgiving God. And even when people would make a mistake or sin is what they call it. Sin is just an archery term, means you missed. That's where that came from. You missed the target. When the guy shot at the target, he missed it. They go, he sinned. He would yell out, he sinned. That's where it came from. So it gives you a different terminology on that one. Hell is actually a garbage pit. If you didn't have enough money for a proper burial, they threw you on the garbage pit and burned you with the rest of the trash. So we need to understand the real history of what this is all about. So we can't no longer be controlled and manipulated. But I don't know if you can see my hands, but if you're going like this, if you're going, okay, God, I want to connect with you, but please don't toast me, I might have done something bad in the past or whatever, you're not going to make that connection. Sorry, it's not going to happen. Now, if you have the image of an all-loving and all-forgiving God, then you can say, I made some mistakes in the past. I've gained a lot of wisdom from them. I'm going to do the best I can. And I really want to connect. Then you're going to make that connection. It's a whole different consciousness. And when Jesus said, neither do I judge thee, nor does my Father judge thee, go and sin no more. What he's saying is like, I'm not here to judge you, nor God doesn't have an ego. It can't even judge. It's beyond that. It's not a little old man with a beard, with a laptop taking notes. It doesn't work that way. Your books are kept within you. And so we have to release ourselves, free ourselves up of the guilt and the fear and the unworthiness, and forgive ourselves for what we've done, transgressions against others, because the other forgiveness is automatic because you've never been judged, and that's what they try to explain. I'm going off on the minister tangent here, but it's like, when you really understand this, then you can release the past. You can go forward and say, you know what, I'm going to work in service to humanity, the earth. I'm going to be in service to the creator within all creation. I'm going to be in service to the omnipresent God that created all the bearded gods and all the other images out there. I'm going to go beyond all the superstition and dogma and just be the most loving, joyous, creative person I can be and pass that on to others, and be an example. Mm-hmm. And that's when things really shift.
So this is all very fascinating, and it seems like you have a very positive outlook as far as where we're headed and all of that, which is great. And I think that for myself and for my viewers, the concept of this shift actually occurring is very interesting to think about, like what this would actually look like. And I think with respect, especially to the financial collapse, if that is imminent, if that would happen, what would that look like? And do you think that it would be a positive outcome?
I really don't think it's going to collapse. The reason why is that, first of all, the petrodollar is basically toilet paper. I mean, it's worthless. And it's only being propped up by the military, and our agreements, with that nobody can buy oil except through the American dollar. Those agreements are gone. I mean, they're gone. So now the good news is that there is a movement to back the dollar with gold and print out a whole new note. It's going to be a treasury note, not a Federal Reserve note. And when that shift happens, everything's in place for that to happen, then there won't be a collapse. If they continue down the old path, that will collapse. And so people need to get behind this new shift where everybody's on a level playing field. And I think it's a series of steps, because, you know, people have a hard time realizing this. We can't go from A to Z. So, you know, people aren't ready. They're not consciously ready for that. But I want you to think about this. And this is going to really mess people up. We don't really need money. We've never needed money. We live in an abundant universe. All civilizations that are advanced don't use money, and they lack for nothing. And the universe is their playground. They have replicators. They can make whatever they want, and they live simply. They don't need it, you know. And so it's hard for us to wrap our heads around. These are the beings that are coming in to assist us right now. They have fuelless energy. They have phenomenal healing technologies. They have the energy medication down, or they have all of that stuff, you know, down. And, you know, they have devices that you could walk through, will scan you, scan all your organs, tell you exactly what's going on. We have that now. It's on the planet. And they can actually energetically rebalance all of your organs and get them back on track. And then they know what to give you to help maintain that, you know. So we need to go back to food should be your medicine. You know, if we eat close to the earth and eat healthy and make sure our water's pure and get exercise and things like that, we'll be fine. And also too, the more we do our spiritual practices, the more we can activate the DNA that's inactive, and we'll live longer, happier, you know, healthy lives, you know. So, you know, we actually have a salamander gene in our body that's deactivated. If we activated that, we could regrow organs, limbs, everything. You know, it's in our body. It's just been deactivated. We just need to activate it. The first thing to realize you could do that is to know that DNA is a code. You know, who wrote the code, right? And so if DNA is a code and everything begins in consciousness, that consciousness came from consciousness to light to energy to the code, and then became mass. So consciousness can rewrite the code, can activate the code. And we have that DNA we have the DNA of the gods within us that can be reactivated through aligning with our own higher consciousness, making our own personal connection to source. And that's when you live these very long lives, you know. Now the Illuminati and the other guys were doing it through technology, which is failing now because they're not energy specific to the earth. And so no matter what technology used for all this longevity stuff is failing right now, because their consciousness is so dark and so heavy, it's imploding. It's actually killing them. They're killing themselves basically by not shifting.
So as we shift as a collective into a more abundance, prosperity-based mindset, we actually release the bonds that we are tied to currently, which involves the financial system. So when you talk about that A to Z and you lay that out, we're here going through that shift. We become dynamic and we realize, okay, we can change the code. And so what will happen along the way is the Federal Reserve will collapse on its own because we won't need it, but there will be systems in place to pick up the pieces to allow us to shift into the next space where we can take on these technologies, because we're at that consciousness level where we can actually receive that.
Yeah, and that's what the white hats are doing. You know, they're working very hard at bringing in a whole different monetary system so we won't have this collapse. And they're trying to create a fair playing field across the globe and bring everybody up to par. And then you don't have all this enslavement through dependency program that's going on, and you know, the misuse of third world countries and things like that. You know, so and people go, oh my God, you know, where will I get my Adidas? You know, like this. It's like, you know, basically, you know, go back to technology. You don't need a child laborer to make those Adidas, and there's probably materials that are even much more better, you know, for you and for humanity. You know, it's like, you know, there are materials out there that are almost like your second skin, you know, and and you know, this is a walk on the wild side that I've been taken up a couple times, and they have a suit that you put on And it's almost like, you know, the spandex suits that people see the travelers in and everything else. It's very tight fitting. It feels better wearing the suit than it does being naked, because the energy in the suit and the materials in the suit are actually protecting and feeding your body. It's really interesting. It's technology beyond our wildest dreams.
So James, I want you to take a shoot here. When do you think the replicators are coming? When do we get the replicators?
No, they're already here. We already have them. Actually, they're already on the planet.
Do you have one in your closet?
No, they're in the hands of the elite right now, who keeps snagging all this technology. But, you know, all this technology is ready to come down, but we need a place for it to happen. So we need, you know, that's what ECETI is about, is to create a place where people live in harmony with each other in the earth and live a very spiritual life. And that's the prerequisites. You know, you have to have an open mind, a loving heart, and pure intent, and they'll work with you. The problem is there's this other group out there that are doing all they can to suppress this from happening. And so this other group is imploding. It's being taken out. You know, they're falling apart. They're no longer functional. And the best way to explain this is there's a Native American prophecy. It comes from the Lakota Nation. And they talk about a beast, and the beast is 2,000 miles wide. So that's how long this beast is going to live. And they said the beast is all consuming. It wants to dominate, consume, enslave everybody. And what happens in the last days, the beast can no longer sustain itself. So it implodes, you know, it takes itself out, it eats its own tail, whatever you want to call it. And then there's 1,000 years of peace. We reunite with the star nations, and the earth is healed very quickly through this technology. And it's a very true prophecy. It is what's going to happen. The Tibetans talk about it. They know it's going to happen. And there are groups out there that are doing all they can to keep this from happening. They're trying to keep the division game going, keep the fear going, keep all these other things moving, you know, to drop the consciousness, to keep it at a controllable level. And those groups are up against a force beyond their imagination. There's no way they can stop this. It's like standing from a tidal wave and saying, stop, you know. Their arrogance is not going to stop the tidal wave. It's going to happen. And their only salvation is to get on the right side of the wave, you know, get on the positive side of the wave, you might say.
So for a skeptic, can you give us a quick rundown list of like evidence that suggests that the elite is falling apart?
Oh, you know, just watch, you know, well, you see the news, right? Okay. A good example is CNN. If you go and read the NASA papers, it says they're going to use CNN as the mind control program for the country, basically. And they're doing it, but it's falling apart. Their whole program is falling apart. And believe it or not, Fox News is the one that's tearing them down more than anybody. And you're probably not gonna get everything from Fox News either. Actually, I was on Fox News, which I was surprised. Hannity actually did a special on ECETI. It was very sanitized, but they did cover it, and which was shocking. But I'd like to see Fox News cover what we're talking about right now. I mean, they never do that, you know, because they don't want to lose face, you know, within the mass, you know, the masses, the muggles, the muggle world, you know. But
maybe when they get their ET chapter, they'll hire me and I'll do that role.
Yeah, there you go. That'd be perfect. Yeah. So what's funny is, God, all these thoughts are coming in my head, and I'm trying to figure out which ones to work with. But there's so much going on. The banksters right now, they're dropping like flies, and they're turning on each other. They're all turning on each other. They're being exposed for all the shenanigans and everything they did. You know, look at, you know, they sold off, you know, a good example is their Uranium One deal. Okay. The whole false dossier against Trump it's an air burger. They even said that it's an air burger. There's nothing there. And the fake news is push this and push this and push this. The problem is that it's going to go full circle. And so it's called karma. It's just a loop. It's going to come back and bite them in the butt. Now they find out that Hillary and Obama and the whole DNC is up to their neck in Russian collusion to the tune of $145 million kickback for selling out uranium. Now look at the Bundy Ranch and the other guys over there. they tried to force them off their land so they could get that uranium, and they used the BLM and all these other people. And now that's coming up again. It's coming back again to bite them in the butt. And so there was so much collusion and so many things done against the American people and selling out the American people that this is all surfacing, and it's all going to come out. So it's been coming out in stages, and now it's all bending back towards the very people that created these things, you know. So it's what I'm saying is there's a loop. I'm using that as an example of whatever you put out, whatever harm you try to create, you know, with others, whatever you lie and deceive others with, it's going to come back. And that's what we're seeing now. It's all being bent back, you know, back on the very people that did the acts that they're accusing everybody else of. And I'm not a Trump fan, as I'm saying before, you know, I want a council of grandmothers, but right now, if Trump does end the feds, and if he does reinstate the republic, which is actually a much more fair system, we don't want socialism, we don't want communism, a republic where everybody is king and queen in their own land, you know, where the Constitution, which is very aligned with universal law, believe it or not, and the Bill of Rights, you know, bring that back and just totally do a revamp on the Just Us system, and you know, bring it back into alignment with the Constitution and universal law, then things will turn around, you know. But there's another step beyond that we need to get to. But I wanted to explain one thing. Unity consciousness is this ninth wave the Mayans talk about. Okay, unity consciousness is a consciousness and energy that's focused on universal law, you know, which is, again, universal peace, brothers, sisters, love, and things like that. Unity consciousness, like open borders and things like that, are doing the exact opposite. They're bringing diametrically opposed religious factions together to create chaos, which is what they do. And so although it may sound good, like open borders and things like that, there's another agenda behind it, and it has nothing to do with open borders. It's to create chaos and just destroy other governments and institutions and things. It's to take them all down through chaos. Now, I don't want to live, you know, in Sharia law. I don't want to see women treated like dogs, actually less than dogs. You know, I don't want it to be okay to beat women whenever you want. And when they come forward and talk about it, then they're the ones that get stoned or killed or whatever. You know, I don't want to, the whole thing. I don't want to go out and publicly execute, you know, gays and things like that. And people are going, well, you know, you're creating separation, division. No, I'm stating the facts. I mean, these are part of that mindset that's being produced. Now, are there good Muslims? I know a lot of really, really good Muslim people, and they are more focused on peace and unity and working together. And so what I think is unity is coming together under universal law, being kind to each other, being loving and supportive to each other. If you aren't on that frequency, on that mindset, then you know, you're going to have to find another planet, because you're not going to be welcome here much longer. That's what's happening with this energy shift, and people aren't going to tolerate it. And you know, and when you really look at the real news behind ISIS and ISIL and all those other things, those were funded by us, you know, and the deep state and things like that. So all that's being exposed right now too. And so these militant factions, they have to be dealt with. They are here. We can't say they're not here and just turn a blind eye and say, hey, you know, and I think all these Hollywood actors and everything else are saying, you know, we have to have open borders. We have to just let everybody come in, things like that. I go, well, bring them to your house. You know, you've got these mansions, you know, you've got this security. You've got armed security. Take them to your house, you know, see how it works out for you.
Yeah. And I mean, the pedophilia, that concept, it's breaking down so fast, I can't even keep up with it. It's every day, it's just a new person coming out talking about it. So that's collapsing for sure.
Well, about 2 months ago, and again, this is a little walk on the wild side. We've had Mary appear here several times, actually. And we've gotten photographs of her at some of the self-mastery and the teachers training classes. And the photographs were taken by a Taoist monk who didn't even know who she was. So it wasn't, you know, some pre-programmed thing. And it was also inside a metal building, which is not Blue Beam, because you can't can't transfer that through a metal building. You know, everybody has these things trying to say what it is. It is what it is. You can't deny it. Everybody there felt it. The women were crying. The apparition appeared, and we got a picture of it. So I've had communication with Mary all my life, and Mary is not Catholic. I hate to burst people's bubbles. Mary is a universal being. She's part of the divine feminine, the Shekinah energies, which is multidimensional, and it's very tied in with the Pleiadian energy as well. But when she came in, she was talking a lot about that, and she was talking about how men need to get in touch with their emotions. Men need to learn to cry. You know, we need to stop all this bottled up stuff, and that's what women are waiting for. You know, the men to figure it out. But she was talking a lot about that. But one of the things she said very clearly is she said she was going to take down the church because of its indiscretions, and she was going to totally expose this whole pedophile network and for what it's been doing to the children. I mean, they are, it's hard to imagine. I don't think they get pissed, but they're done with it. They are totally done with what's going on. And she talks about, she talks about the real God. She goes, the real God is finished. It's finished with this draconian mess. This planet on the outermost corner of the Milky Way in the boondocks has been left alone. They're done with what's happened here, and this is going to be set right, and so there is going to be a major planetary liberation, and Mary is very instrumental in putting an end to this pedophile nonsense and the total crap, within the church that's been going on.
That's super interesting. And I feel like, James, we could probably do an entire interview on that alone. I would love to. I lived in Virginia, and I was raised Catholic, and I went to the St. Elizabeth and Seton Catholic Church. And I was there during the time of the Seton miracles, where the statues of Mary in the church were crying. And it was when all of the pedophilia was coming out in the church, right in that area. Very interesting synchronicity. So, yes, go ahead.
And, to me, I'm not here to bash Catholics. I think there's a lot of beautiful people in the Catholic Church. It's usually the elite and the upper management, you might say. And unfortunately, the higher you go up in all of these institutions, whether it be religious, political, business institutions, it starts moving up it gets darker and darker. And then eventually it goes into this unseen energy, which they do their sacrifices to and their ceremonies. The satanic rituals and everything else are to these darker unseen influences, which are part of the Archon or Draconian grid. Everybody has a different name on who they're the devil, Lucifer, whatever, reptilians. Everybody has a different name for this Archon grid, but there is a grid, and you can say Archon or Draconian grid. It's the same grid. That grid is just being torn apart right now. And those entities that they used to draw power from, are gone. They've been taken out. And so now these guys, the puppets, are floundering in the heads of all these institutions. They're floundering, their bodies are failing, they're falling apart. You're going to see a lot of them just drop like flies here pretty quick. They're becoming babbling idiots because the puppet master's gone. And so now they can't even stand up for themselves. They have no protection, and they are going to go down. And that's basically what we're seeing right now.
You described that beautifully, because that's a lot of the way that I describe it when I talk about you have the religions and the groups or organizations, whatever you want to call it. They're all over the place, but you have good people that are a part of these organizations, and they really do good work, and they really are helping their communities. But when you go up higher and higher and higher, you're going to get to a level, at some level, there's going to be bad stuff going on. So people want to blanket, all Catholics are bad. No, that's actually not true at all.
And where does that money, it's like saying all Muslims are bad, all Catholics are bad. There's Christians that are just as tyrannical as these other people, and, there are some really good Muslims that Christians would love to just hang and torture and things like that. It's just, we got to stop looking at pigeonholing things or putting everybody into the same bed. It doesn't work that way. We have to look at their merit, their consciousness, how do they treat each other? How do they treat the planet? Things like that. We need to start looking at things like that versus stereotyping, different groups of different people.
Absolutely. And James, I want to say, I just appreciate your work so much. I feel so blessed that I was able to come to the ranch and spend some time with you and your family and really get a chance to dive in and see what that was like, that experience. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your project at ECETI and telling us how we can find your work?
Okay. Well, the best thing to do is go to eceti.org, or you can go to ECETI Stargate, the official channel on YouTube, and see a lot of the footage and a lot of the talks and things like that that I've done. That's the best way to do it. And I always tell people, come and see it yourself. This people need to do their own research and have their own experiences, and then it's real for them. Nobody can take it away from them. And that's what Danny Dyer said when he was here. He said, "I did it. I saw the ships. They're real. Nobody can take that away from me." So Robbie Williams, all these famous people have come up here and have seen the ships. And
I've
so,
seen the ships. I've seen
yeah,
them.
yeah, exactly. And so, that it's real for you now. You've felt the consciousness and energy. You've seen the shifts in people that come here. You've seen all this stuff. And so it's your own experience. Nobody can take that. They'll try to shut you down. Social consciousness will try to shut that out, friends and family that want to remain in the old consciousness, but they can't take that away from you because you own it now. It's yours. It's your experience. And that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, and I did a whole series of videos of vlogs. There, I think, are 3 videos that I did about my experience at ECETI. So for those of you watching now, feel free to go back and watch those. There's some really interesting content. We talk about portals, we talk about ships, we talk about all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's so much going on here, but we are basically a Stargate, and we are a place where it's with a Stargate, there's much more to it. It's like a vortex where the veils between worlds become very, very thin. And so that's why we have masters appearing. We've got pictures of Babaji, of Kuan Yin, of Mary appearing here, Kazika, which is a golden energy. It's a merged energy of Ezekiel of old in the Bible, and Cassia, feminine energy, where they merge together. A lot of these people don't ascend without the help of a woman. People don't realize that. Mary Magdalene went through all the mystery schools. She was part of the royal family. She was very adept, and her connection with Jesus creates the union to ascend. You have to be whole to reach the highest levels of consciousness. So you have to merge the positive and negative energies, the male, female, whatever you want to call it. When they come together, you can do it within yourself. It's not that easy. It's harder to do within yourself, but you can do it. But people really shut down and downplay the feminine side of things. And I think it's really sad. And that's why we're in the condition we're in today on the planet.
Thank you so much, James. You are just an endless well of information. I appreciate you so much. And thank you for coming on Divine Frequency. And I thought that I could ask you a question.
Yeah.
So you're on Divine Frequency. I would love it, and you're a minister, if you could say a blessing for us. That would be really cool. Can I put you on the spot?
A blessing. You know what? I'll tell you, I'll give you something even better than a blessing. How's that?
Oh, awesome.
I'll give you a way to heal unseen negative influences, and that'll catapult people through the roof, because you're only going to expand in consciousness to the level that you feel safe or clear. And we do have unseen negative influences, and a lot of our thoughts aren't our own. They aren't ours. They've been coming in from other levels and things like that. And so when you clear these energies, if everybody would sit down in the morning and do it, we usually do it morning, noon, and night here, and we do it in groups, and we're constantly clearing the whole grid here on the planet. But we'll give that one out. And so it's a very simple process. The first thing you do, this is a power tool. You need to plug it in, So you're going to plug it into your own God self, whatever you want to call it, that part of you that's connected to the source. You can work with known ascended masters. You can call on Mary, Kuan Yin, Jesus, Babaji, whoever you want to call in that Buddha, whoever's a known master. Be sure you're working with the higher dimensional beings. And so you call upon your image that you feel most comfortable, most connected to, you feel safe with. You bring that in, connect with that. And then you welcome the entities. You say, "Dear ones, we welcome you in love and light. You're healed and forgiven, lifted and enlightened. You're filled and surrounded with the Christ light and the Christ love. You're free of all pain and suffering. free to move on to the Christ consciousness, the Christ vibration, and we ask the beautiful many to take you to your perfect place. And so you can use that in your own words. It's not something in stone. So the basic premise is you welcome all entities in love and light. And whatever you say, when you say you're filled and surrounded with the Christ light or the Buddha light or the Mary light, and that does happen. Your words manifest on their level. They are surrounded by that light. And when you ask your representative or the beautiful many to take them to their perfect place, they are taken. And they're taken away. And they're no longer able to influence others or manipulate others. And right now, if we did that as a collective, and again, don't worry about making a mistake or not doing it right. Intention is 9/10 of the law in this. It's just your intention. Do that 2 or 3 times a day. Pray for the politicians to wake up and figure it out. Take away the influences around them that are getting them to do these insane things. You know, you can pray for the church leaders. You can have the influences taken away from that. You can pray for the whole planet. You can see the whole planet surrounded in light, in that beautiful golden light of bliss, the green light, the healing light. You can use transformational light, such as violet or purple or things like that. Whatever feels right to you, just sit down every day and just send that to the earth. And the most powerful way to do this is if you go into meditation and you connect to the source and go up that and connect to the source and then send energy back to the earth from the source. Those are the meditations that we do here in groups, where we actually call upon the source energy to come in, and it's aligned with universal law. And we clear out any unseen negative influences first and make sure we have clear space before we do this. So before any practice you do, clear the space, create sacred space. It's really important. You don't do that, you're just inviting anything to come in.
Thank you so much for that. That was awesome. That's so much good information. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you wanted to chat about? I mean, I feel like that was pretty whole. I want to bring you on the show more. I feel like we could talk for like quite a few hours, probably.
Yeah. Well, I think what it goes back to is, as I said before, it goes back to, are you creating heaven on earth? Is your belief system aligned with creating heaven on earth? Is it aligned with universal law? And if it's not, we have to sit down with brutal honesty and take a good look at this and let go of what no longer serves us. So, you know, they asked the Dalai Lama, you know, what religion do you believe is the closest, you know, what's your practice? And he goes, I practice kindness. You know, how hard is that? It's really simple. Take it back to the old Cherokee saying, you know, if it isn't good for everyone, it isn't good. And stop misusing that power chakra. Use it to empower others and empower yourself to make your own personal God connection and get on with your own unique purpose.
There it is. That's beautiful. All right. Well, we're going to leave it at that this time around. I'm your host, Teresa Yanaris. This is Divine Frequency. And thank you so much, James Gilliland, for coming on the show.
Anytime. Thanks for being such a good host and asking the good questions.
Absolutely. All right, guys. See you next time. Speak your truth. Bye.